On June 19, 2025, Denmark's Ministry of Digital Affairs began replacing Microsoft Office inside part of its own department. The replacement was not another American cloud subscription. Employees were asked to test Collabra, built on LibreOffice. The pilot was deliberately small, but the political message behind it was much larger than a different word processor. Denmark wanted to know whether public administration could function without making one technology company impossible to leave. Just months later, another European government system had moved far beyond testing and into something much harder to reverse. In northern Germany, Schleswig-Holstein was uninstalling Microsoft Office and Outlook from much of its public administration. By December 2025, LibreOffice was the binding office standard on nearly 80% of workplaces outside the tax administration. More than 40,000 government mailboxes had already been moved away from Microsoft Exchange and Outlook. France was building a different answer. Not a single Office replacement, but an open-source digital workplace called La Suite. By 2026, La Suite was being used monthly by more than 500,000 public employees across 15 ministries and other administrations. And hidden inside that sovereign workplace was the feature that changes the entire battle over government productivity software. Artificial intelligence, France's doc service, can connect to a government generative AI platform for drafting, summarizing, formatting, and translating text. Its GRIS data tool includes an AI assistant while remaining part of an open-source, publicly governed productivity environment. The Office Suite war is no longer really about whether Writer can replace Word or whether Calc can open an Excel file. It is becoming a struggle over who controls the intelligence sitting between a civil servant and every document that person creates. For 30 years, governments worried about proprietary file formats, licensing costs, compatibility, and vendor lock-in. Now the same Office ecosystem can include email, identity, cloud storage, meetings, analytics, document search, and generative AI. That means changing Office software is no longer like replacing a typewriter. It can mean rebuilding the operating environment of government itself. And that is why open-source productivity suites, once dismissed as cheaper imitations, are suddenly becoming instruments of state power. The word abandoning needs care. Most governments are not deleting Microsoft Office from every computer, and Microsoft remains deeply embedded across public administrations worldwide. Some agencies are running pilots. Others are replacing only selected components. Many will remain hybrid for years. But a documented shift is underway in parts of Europe, and its driving force is no longer simply the price of software licenses. The deeper issue is digital sovereignty, whether a public institution can continue operating, inspect its technology, move its data, change suppliers, and control sensitive workflows without requiring permission from a single vendor. That question becomes much harder when a productivity suite is delivered through a tightly integrated cloud platform whose email, identity, documents, collaboration, security, and AI features reinforce one another. Microsoft's integration is precisely why governments use it. Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, Entra Identity, Endpoint Management, Security Services, and Copilot can form an extremely capable enterprise environment. A ministry can buy a broad stack from one supplier, standardize users, centralize administration, and receive enterprise support. For decades, that convenience created enormous institutional gravity. The problem appears when convenience becomes an exit barrier. A government may store millions of documents in familiar formats, build workflows around macros and SharePoint, authenticate employees through one identity platform, archive mail in one ecosystem, manage devices through another service from the same vendor, and train an entire workforce around its interfaces. Replacing one product then risks breaking 5 others. Artificial intelligence raises the stakes because the most valuable data inside government is often already sitting in office systems. Draft laws, procurement documents, internal memos, citizen correspondence, budget spreadsheets, investigation records, meeting transcripts, and policy analysis all pass through productivity software. An AI assistant integrated into that environment can become extraordinarily useful because it can summarize, search, generate, classify, and connect information across those workflows. But usefulness produces a new form of dependence. If employees begin relying on an AI layer to retrieve institutional knowledge, draft documents, analyze spreadsheets, summarize meetings, or search archives, the model and its surrounding infrastructure become part of daily government operations. Changing Office vendors later may no longer mean migrating files. It may mean replacing the institutional memory interface that workers have learned to depend on. That possibility is why France's approach is so revealing. The suite is designed as a collection of open-source tools for public employees rather than a clone of one commercial package. It includes secure messaging, video meetings, collaborative documents, data tools, file sharing, and other services connected through a common government identity system. The architecture is built around interoperability, public governance, reversibility, and hosting under French-controlled requirements. The AI layer follows the same philosophy. Docs can use Albert API, a generative AI service developed for French public administration. Its stated functions include assisting with writing, summarization, formatting, and translation. The significance is not that these abilities are technologically unique. Commercial office suites can perform similar tasks. The significance is that France is attempting to place generative AI inside an environment whose code, deployment rules, hosting, and governance can be shaped by the state. This transforms open source from an ideological preference into an infrastructure strategy. If the code is open, a government can inspect it, modify it, commission another company to maintain it, or deploy it in a different environment. That does not make the software automatically secure or inexpensive. It changes the bargaining structure. The state has more than one possible path forward if a supplier changes direction. France also emphasizes reversibility. Documents can be imported and exported through standard formats, and the broader platform is designed around interoperable components. That sounds mundane until a government considers a 30-year archive. A word processing feature lasts for a product cycle. Public records may need to remain readable for generations. The state has a different time horizon from a private software subscription. Schleswig-Holstein reached the same problem from another direction. Its government did not begin with artificial intelligence. It began by dismantling dependencies one layer at a time. LibreOffice replaced Microsoft Office as the standard productivity suite. Open document formats were promoted. Email moved from Exchange and Outlook to OpenExchange and Thunderbird. Nextcloud and other open systems became pieces of a planned sovereign workplace. The scale made the project difficult to dismiss as a laboratory demonstration. On October 2, 2025, Schleswig-Holstein completed the migration of more than 40,000 mailboxes, containing well over 100 million emails and calendar entries. The change affected ministries, justice institutions, police, and other state bodies. By December, officials said LibreOffice was already used on nearly 80% of workplaces outside the tax administration. The government also reported more than 15 million euros in license savings, while budgeting 9 million euros in one-time migration and development investment for 2026. Those figures do not prove open source is always cheaper. They demonstrate the economic structure officials are trying to change. Instead of recurring dependence on licensing alone, more money can be redirected toward migration, support, integration, and software that the state can continue using. The remaining 20% of workplaces revealed the hardest part of the transition. Specialist applications still depended on Microsoft Office or Windows-oriented workflows. A government cannot simply announce that every macro, template, database, legal form, accounting tool, and specialist application will become compatible by political decree. Legacy systems become the hidden anchors holding proprietary software in place. That is why serious migrations are incremental. Office documents may move first, email may follow, collaboration tools are replaced, open standards are introduced, web applications reduce dependence on desktop software. Only after those surrounding systems loosen does changing the operating system become realistic. Schleswig-Holstein's longer-term sovereign workplace includes Linux, but the process demonstrates that desktop freedom depends on much more than the desktop. Germany's federal government is developing a parallel route through OpenDesk, the open-source office and collaboration suite managed by the Center for Digital Sovereignty, known as Zendis. OpenDesk combines browser-based workplace components for email, calendars, contacts, project work, video, chat, notes, and knowledge management. In 2026, German social insurance organizations tested it as an emergency workplace for crisis scenarios. That experiment exposed another reason governments care about alternative productivity stacks: resilience. If a critical digital environment becomes unavailable, compromised, commercially restricted, or operationally inaccessible, an administration needs a second path to communicate and work. Redundancy is normal in electricity, telecommunications, and physical infrastructure. Governments are beginning to treat workplace software with similar strategic seriousness. Germany also changed public sector procurement mechanics in 2026. Revised EVB IT contract templates incorporated open source software into standard government purchasing and made open source the default model for newly developed public administration software under those templates. Procurement rules rarely generate dramatic headlines, but they influence thousands of technical decisions that accumulate over years. Denmark's experiment illustrates the caution behind the movement. Its Ministry of Digital Affairs did not claim Collabra would automatically replace Microsoft Office across the entire state. The June 2025 pilot specifically tested whether open-source document editing could handle government templates, tracked changes, tables, official case formats, and conversion to and from Word files without damaging layouts. Those tests reveal what ordinary comparisons miss. Governments do not choose Office software based only on whether someone can type a letter or build a simple spreadsheet. They depend on thousands of standardized templates, legal formatting conventions, archived files, tracked revisions, accessibility requirements, automated workflows, signatures, and specialist integrations. A 1% incompatibility rate can become a massive operational problem when millions of documents are involved. The newest productivity suites are being designed around that lesson. Instead of asking every ministry to assemble dozens of unrelated projects, governments and public institutions are trying to package open components into coherent workplaces. Single sign-on, centralized administration, shared design systems, audit logs, security policies, support models, and cloud deployment matter as much as the individual word processor. Artificial intelligence gives those new suites an unexpected opportunity because the productivity market is being disrupted anyway. Workers are learning new interfaces, whether governments change vendors or not. AI assistants are altering how documents are drafted. Meetings are summarized, spreadsheets are analyzed, and archives are searched. The old office workflow is already being rewritten from inside. That weakens one psychological advantage of the incumbent. If employees must adapt to a new AI-assisted way of working, governments can ask whether the transition should reinforce the existing platform or become the moment to reduce dependency. The answer will differ by agency, but the timing is unusual. A major technological transition creates a window in which architecture choices that once seemed fixed can be reconsidered. France is moving directly into that window. The suite's doc service can place AI inside collaborative document editing, while Grist can combine structured data work with an AI assistant. The government's broader 2026 AI strategy argues for bringing generative AI into tools employees already use while maintaining a sovereign and secure framework. That is a deliberate attempt to prevent AI adoption from recreating the dependencies governments are trying to escape elsewhere. The phrase sovereign AI can sound nationalistic, but in public administration, it has a practical meaning. Officials may need to know where sensitive data is processed, which model receives it, how logs are retained, whether prompts are reused, who can inspect the system, which jurisdiction applies to infrastructure, and whether the service can continue if a commercial relationship changes. Open source can help with some of those questions because code and model components may be deployable on infrastructure selected by the government. It does not answer everything. Open models can still require proprietary chips, cloud capacity, external datasets, or specialized vendors. A state can replace software lock-in only to discover that it has created hardware, model, or hosting lock-in somewhere else. That is why the emerging strategy is less about independence from every company than about optionality. No modern government can realistically build every chip, database, office suite, language model, and cloud platform itself. Digital sovereignty means retaining credible alternatives, avoiding irreversible architecture, and preserving the ability to shift suppliers when security, economics, law, or geopolitics change. The European Commission formalized that direction in June 2026, when it announced a new open source strategy as part of a broader technological sovereignty package. The strategy calls for more open and interoperable digital ecosystems, greater use of open source in public administrations, reusable government software, and investment in skills and infrastructure. It does not order Europe to remove Microsoft. It changes what alternatives governments are expected to cultivate. That difference is essential. Microsoft Office is not being abandoned because governments suddenly discovered open source ideology. In many cases, Microsoft products remain the benchmark alternatives must beat. The pressure comes from a strategic calculation. A public administration should not become incapable of operating without one commercial ecosystem, especially as that ecosystem expands from productivity software into cloud computing and artificial intelligence. Cost reinforces the calculation. Subscription licensing has transformed enterprise software from periodic purchases into recurring operating expenditure. Bundled services can provide strong value, but they can also make true component-level cost comparison difficult. Once identity, security, storage, meetings, email, office applications, and AI are purchased together, removing one layer may not reduce spending in a simple way. Open source environments have their own costs. Software must be integrated. Vulnerabilities must be patched. Employees need support. Features must be developed. Compatibility testing never ends. Someone must take responsibility for roadmaps and incident response. Denmark's digital agency explicitly warned in 2025 that open source adoption requires capable IT organizations and that smaller agencies may struggle without external expertise. That warning cuts through one of the oldest myths surrounding free software. Free access to source code does not mean free operation. The economic advantage comes from competition and control, not zero cost. A government can pay multiple companies to support the same open platform rather than being technically bound to the copyright owner. It can invest in reusable improvements instead of paying only for permission to use software. The security argument is equally nuanced. Open source is not automatically safer because anyone can inspect the code. Vulnerabilities can remain unnoticed for years in public repositories. Projects can be underfunded, dependencies abandoned, and supply chains compromised. Proprietary vendors can employ enormous security teams. The real sovereignty advantage is the possibility of independent inspection and the ability to act without waiting exclusively for one vendor. AI makes auditability even harder. Traditional software executes program logic. Generative models produce probabilistic outputs learned from vast training data. Even with open weights or open code, governments must evaluate hallucinations, bias, prompt injection, data leakage, model updates, and the possibility that an assistant confidently produces a false statement inside an official document. So an AI-driven government productivity suite cannot simply copy consumer chatbot behavior. It needs permissions, logging, model selection rules, human review, document-level access control, and restrictions on what data can be sent to which model. Ideally, the AI layer should be replaceable so that one model can be substituted without rebuilding the whole workplace. This is one area where modular open architectures may offer an advantage. If the document editor calls a standardized government AI service rather than embedding one proprietary model permanently into the application, administrators can change the underlying model while preserving the interface employees use. The intelligence becomes a service layer rather than a permanent identity of the Office suite. France's Albert API points toward that model. The goal is not to make every public employee a machine learning engineer. It is to give ordinary tools controlled access to government-approved generative AI. An employee can request a summary or drafting assistance inside the workplace, while administrators retain more authority over which models and infrastructures provide the response. That architecture could become more important than the choice between Word and LibreOffice. In an AI-centered workplace, the document editor may become only the surface. The valuable layer is the context system underneath: who the employee is, what files that person can access, which records the AI can search, how citations are generated, what confidential data is excluded, and where the output is stored. Whoever controls that layer can become extraordinarily difficult to replace. Governments understand this because they have already lived through decades of file format and enterprise platform lock-in. The fear is not simply repeating the mistake, it is repeating it at a deeper level where the proprietary system mediates access to institutional knowledge itself. Open standards therefore become a defensive technology. Documents should remain readable outside one application. Identity should support federation. APIs should allow replacement components. Data should be exportable. AI systems should ideally expose interfaces that permit different models and providers. The goal is not ideological purity, it is preventing one technical decision from becoming permanent institutional captivity. This is also why browser-based government workplaces are gaining attention. A browser can decouple many applications from the underlying operating system. If documents, mail, collaboration, video, and data tools run through standards-based web interfaces, an administration gains freedom to change desktops later. Windows, Linux, or another platform becomes less determinative than it was when every critical application required a native client. The AI transition may accelerate the same effect. Generative assistants are often delivered through web interfaces and APIs rather than deeply local desktop programs. A government designing its own AI service can connect multiple front-end tools to the same controlled backend. That makes the productivity suite more modular and, at least in theory, easier to replace component by component. Yet Microsoft has a formidable counterargument. Integration itself reduces risk. A unified vendor can provide identity, compliance tools, endpoint security, records management, data loss prevention, collaboration, and AI under one enterprise architecture. Administrators may prefer one accountability chain to a patchwork of projects whose maintainers, licenses, and support contracts differ. Microsoft can also innovate quickly because its commercial incentives are enormous. Copilot features can appear directly inside Word, Excel, Outlook, and Teams, where employees already work. An open-source government project may need longer procurement cycles, public funding, cross-agency governance, and consensus among multiple maintainers before delivering a comparable feature. This means the contest will not be decided by philosophy. Employees will decide much of it through friction. If an open suite takes 3 extra steps to complete a daily task, resistance compounds across thousands of workers. If Word documents break during conversion, political confidence collapses. If the AI assistant is slower or less accurate, employees may secretly return to consumer tools. France has already identified that final danger: uncontrolled use of public generative AI services by government workers. Once employees discover that consumer AI can save time, banning it without providing an approved alternative creates shadow AI. Sensitive content may then flow into tools the institution has not evaluated. A sovereign suite becomes useful not merely because officials prefer open source, but because workers need an attractive sanctioned alternative. That changes the competitive requirement. Government software can no longer survive by being technically compliant but unpleasant to use. If the official system is noticeably worse, employees will route around it. Modern open source public sector suites therefore need polished interfaces, mobile access, real-time collaboration, strong search, good performance, and AI features that feel competitive with commercial products. The suite's scale suggests that public software can reach meaningful adoption when it is treated as a product rather than a one-off government IT project. More than 500,000 agents reportedly use the suite monthly, while its chat messaging service has reached an even larger user base. That does not make France Microsoft free. It proves that a publicly governed alternative can become normal enough to matter. The same lesson appears in Germany. Schleswig-Holstein's migration became credible only when thousands of ordinary employees used LibreOffice and open-source mail systems for real administrative work. OpenDesk became more credible when social insurance organizations tested it as a crisis workplace rather than admiring it in a demonstration. Denmark's pilot matters because officials are testing tracked changes and document conversion, not merely making speeches about sovereignty. Each project is exposing a different layer of the same dependency. Germany is demonstrating migration at scale. Denmark is testing compatibility before expansion. France is building a full digital workplace with integrated sovereign AI. The European Union is changing the policy environment around open ecosystems. None of these alone replaces Microsoft's position. Together, they create an alternative path that did not exist at the same maturity a decade ago. The next test will be whether these systems can interoperate across borders and levels of government. A sovereign platform that works only inside one ministry can become another silo. Open source creates the legal ability to reuse code, but organizational compatibility still requires shared standards, funding, governance, and sustained engineering. Artificial intelligence could either solve or worsen that problem. Translation models can help administrations work across languages. AI can summarize complex records, assist accessibility, extract structured data, and automate repetitive document tasks, but different agencies may adopt incompatible models and safety rules, creating a new fragmentation layer, even while old Office dependencies decline. The European strategy therefore emphasizes open models and ecosystems alongside open software. In practice, the strongest architecture may be plural rather than uniform. Several approved models, several cloud or data center options, interoperable productivity tools, and common identity and security standards. Competition survives inside the government environment instead of being eliminated at procurement. There is also a geopolitical dimension governments cannot ignore. Public sector computing depends heavily on companies headquartered outside the jurisdictions that use them. This does not mean foreign vendors are inherently untrustworthy. It means governments must consider legal authority, sanctions, export controls, corporate acquisitions, service discontinuation, and geopolitical disputes as part of operational risk. A ministry does not buy software with the same assumptions as a private startup. The state must imagine crisis scenarios decades ahead. Can it keep reading records? Can it patch systems? Can it move workloads? Can it communicate if one provider is unavailable? Can it run AI on sensitive information without exporting control over the processing environment? Those questions explain why open source has moved from the edges of public IT towards strategy documents, cabinet decisions, and procurement law. It is not merely a cheaper way to write documents. It is one mechanism for converting technology from rented capability into infrastructure that government can more directly govern. But the movement can still fail. Budgets can be cut. Political leadership can change. Employees can reject new tools. Compatibility problems can overwhelm migration teams. Open source projects can fragment or lose maintainers. Commercial vendors can lower prices or improve sovereign cloud offerings enough to make switching less attractive. Some governments may conclude that the best outcome is hybrid. Microsoft for selected workloads, open suites for others, sovereign AI for sensitive tasks, commercial AI where risk is low, and open standards binding the pieces together. From a sovereignty perspective, that could still be a victory if no single provider remains impossible to leave. The transformation is therefore not measured by how many governments uninstall Word tomorrow. It is measured by whether Word remains the only realistic place a government can work. It is measured by whether an administration can move mail, documents, meetings, storage, and AI without rebuilding itself from zero. That is why the seemingly modest Danish Collabra pilot matters. Why Schleswig-Holstein's 40,000 mailbox migration matters. Why Germany is testing OpenDesk in crisis scenarios. Why France is inserting sovereign AI into the suite. And why Europe is rewriting open source strategy while generative AI is still young. The productivity suite has become the command surface of modern bureaucracy. Almost every decision eventually passes through a document, message, spreadsheet, meeting, database, or search interface. Add AI to that surface, and the suite begins interpreting information before the human even sees it. Governments are realizing that control over this layer is not simply an IT purchasing decision. It affects institutional memory, operational resilience, public records, procurement leverage, security, and the future relationship between civil servants and machine-generated knowledge. Microsoft remains one of the strongest companies in that market and will remain deeply embedded in government for the foreseeable future. The real shift is that public administrations are investing in the ability to say no, to leave selected components, to run alternatives, and to keep functioning afterward. Open source gives them source code. Open standards give them portability. Publicly controlled AI infrastructure gives them another possible layer of autonomy. None of these guarantees success, but together they change the negotiating position. The Office suite of the future may not be a single program sold in a box or even a single cloud subscription. It may be a modular workplace in which documents, data, meetings, identity, storage, and AI can be replaced independently without taking the institution hostage. That is the deeper reason governments are experimenting with open source AI-driven productivity suites now. They are not merely searching for another way to write the same memo. They are trying to make sure the intelligence that helps write the memo never becomes more powerful than the government's ability to replace it.